Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here for our session entitled Making a Difference, STEAM Projects for Community Impact. Today we are going to introduce you to a project that the three of us worked on together at Oak Elementary School, which is in Bartlett, Tennessee, as part of the Bartlett City Schools District, and it is a STEAM project. So you will get to see how the arts were integrated with the other subjects, science, technology, engineering, and math, and what the students did, how the project was evaluated, what the students and teachers thought about the project. So you'll get to see from beginning to end what this project looked like in Bartlett, and also how community partners were involved in the work that we did. This is a quote that I included that's in the program, and I think it's very important for us to consider when we're looking at projects like this, even at the elementary school level, that when we're introducing these subjects in this project-based learning type way, it's very important to consider how these subjects interact with each other across all disciplines. And as a fine arts supervisor in the district that I work in, I was particularly interested in exploring how the arts could be integrated into a project like this. I should say that this project was funded through a grant that Oak Elementary has from the Tennessee Arts Commission. It's their Arts 360 grant program. If you're looking for a program or a grant that you can apply for to engage in STEAM or arts integrated opportunities in your district, please look into the Tennessee Arts Commission's grant programs. They have several grants that could apply for a project like this. Arts 360 is a 3-year grant program, $55,000 distributed over 3 years. It's a great way to get your students and teachers and administrators involved in projects like this where you're looking at multiple disciplines in these sorts of programs. So check that out at, I believe the web address is tnartscommission.org. I'm Dr. Brad Foust. I'm the Fine Arts Supervisor in Bartlett City Schools, and here with me today is...
Hi, I'm Jessica Kennerly, and I'm a 4th grade teacher at Oak Elementary.
And we have with us in the back here monitoring Dr. Amanda Galbraith.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you all today. I have 18 years of experience as a visual art teacher at the elementary level, and I work as a postdoc at the University of Tennessee.
So the three of us worked together on this project, and Jessica will be sharing a lot of details with you in just a moment on how this project unfolded at Oak Elementary School with the entire 4th grade level. So today we're going to look at what inspired the project. We'll go into instructional design. We'll look at what happened in the project. We'll talk about reflection, project assessment, and then we'll leave some time at the end for questions. Before we dive into the details of the project, I'd like for you to look at this self-assessment for just a moment. Take a look at these 5 items. Think about how you would answer those, and then in just about 60 seconds, we're going to go through and just very quickly answer these, and we'll see if anyone would like to, make any comments on these survey items. Okay, that's probably quicker than 60 seconds, but we'll go through these and answer these all together. So for the first 2 items here, you have high, medium, low. You can show me your answers to these. 3 fingers for medium, or 3 for high, 2 for medium, 1 for low. Okay, your comfort or experience level with cross-content collaboration is high, medium, low. Okay, very good. Your comfort experience level with collaboration with community partners, high, medium, low. Very good. Okay, and these are on scale 1 to 5. 1 is strongly disagree, 5 strongly agree. There's room for including civic components in the learning process. Good, good. The art should be integrated into non-arts learning processes. Great. That makes me happy to see that. And then one more. There are multiple ways to document the learning process. Yes, and all of you, I'm sure many of you are experienced educators or administrators, so you know that it's absolutely possible to document learning in multiple ways and introduce projects in multiple ways. And this is one example of a project that was introduced at this school, like I said, to the entire fourth grade level. And now I'm going to turn the microphone over to Ms. Kennerly, a fourth grade teacher at Oak, who really led this project in the school. And she's going to go through some slides here and show you some examples of what students did in this project and how the community was involved.
Okay, so I would say that my answer to all of those at the beginning of this project was pretty low for me. I came from second grade and I was moving back into big kids and I hadn't lived in a big kid world for very long. Our kids are 9 and 10 and there's 115 of them, okay? Every single one of them participated in the project. Every single one of them had a job. We gave them all committees that they were on, which you're gonna kind of see that in a second when we click to the next slide. Oh, I don't know where the clicker is. Sorry, I don't do this very often if y'all can't tell. Okay, so I know that this is not an issue in other parts of the state as much because Ms. Galbraith is from Knoxville area and it's not as much of an issue. But in Bartlett, we have some major erosion issues, okay? Erosion, as you can imagine, is kind of a dry subject to teach fourth graders. They're not super into it. So we were like, okay, this is a tested thing. It's really boring the way that our textbook presented it. How can we turn this into something fun that the kids are going to remember and that they're going to actually buy into? These are some pictures that the kids took. If you can't tell, they're kind of kid angled, right? Kid feet and all that in there. But we saw in our local newspaper that our little city of Bartlett is having a lot of issues with erosion and the cost that's associated with fixing the problem. So we decided, why don't we let our kids create companies that are erosion companies that fix erosion, which those exist. We checked. And our kids decided to take this on, and then we reached out to central office and we reached out to people in the community, our city hall, and you're going to see a couple of those people in a second, but we reached out to those people and said, hey, how do we do this? Like, how do we get 9 and 10-year-olds to understand what erosion is, to create an erosion company, and to buy into the fact that this is actually enjoyable and fun? So this was their initial, some of their evidence of erosion. Okay. So this is a quote from one of our babies, and it said, I feel that it's more important for the community to know more about erosion, which was a big takeaway at the end because our kids knew what erosion was, but they knew what it was in a textbook. They knew what it looked like when a mountain has erosion, not when the city of Bartlett has erosion. So for our kids, we reached out to Dr. Foust, who helped us with our grant that he spoke about and how we were going to use it. And he connected us with Amanda, and he connected us with our Shan Criswell, who is our Director of Parks and Recreation. If you do this project or you do one like it, that's a great place to start, is your Parks and Rec person, because they're in charge of figuring out the budget to fix things like this, which I also didn't know until we did this project. And then we worked with Dr. Foust, and we decided, okay, they're 9 and 10. We can't just release them into the world to make an erosion company. They're not going to be very good at it if we do. So what we did was we created 5 teams that fit with STEAM. A science team who was going to pretend like everyone that we were going to eventually present to, which we presented at City Hall at the end of the project, we were going to pretend like they had never heard of erosion before. They were adults, but they didn't know what it was. So this was our research team, and they were explaining things. For those of you who might have to have reading grades in there, we had them like write out this whole thing, and we got to take a grade on that. I know that's important to teachers. We have to be able to take grades along the way. Then we had our engineering team, which some of the lovely pictures that you saw were taken by our engineering team. They're the ones that had to decide how we were going to fix the problem. Okay, this was a lot of my Apex kids, and in Bartlett, those are our kids that are like advanced, and they get pulled out at times of the day. So they were having to use a price list and a sheet that I had given them that had different things that could fix erosion, like plants and bushes. And then we did a water erosion. I didn't know what a dredger was before this. If you don't know, it's basically a water vacuum for a pond. And I had to figure out how to do that for a team. But we created this big spreadsheet, and they had to decide how they were going to fix the problem. Well, then our engineering team had to work with I'm going to come back to our A. Our math team was the kids that had to figure out how much all this was going to cost, real world cost, and they were going to have to put that number into a budget that we were going to present to City Hall, because we were giving them a bid, like, you should go with us to fix your issues. Some of our fourth graders thought they were really going to go with us, and I had to explain to them that is not a thing. Sorry, kids. They even wanted a smoke machine and music to present at City Hall. They didn't tell me that till the day of the project. I said, I can't swing it this year, but I'll keep that in mind for next year. And then our A was our art team. And we know that a lot of our kids, some science things just don't really fit them. They struggle in school, or they're those kids that art is their passion. So our art team was a marketing team. They created a name for our business. They created a logo. They created all of the branding for us. And they worked with, I forgot our T. They worked with our technology team. And what our technology team was is they took all of the information collected, pictures and everything, and put it into this really cool, cohesive presentation that a couple of presenters gave for each one of the locations that I picked in Bartlett. There was 5 homerooms, so we did 5 locations, and that's kind of how they did that. And I think you're going to see a bunch of that on this next slide. Okay. Those teams that I just talked about, obviously, not every kid wants to be a part of the art team or the science team or technology. So what we did was we gave them first, second, and third choice. We gave them a Google form. They picked which teams were their top 3 choices. And they told us why they would be good for that. And then as close as we could, we tried to give the kids the teams that they wanted. So each of the 5 homerooms that we have, because there's 5 classes in our grade level, they all applied for their specific team, and then they did breakouts with all of the art teams from all 5 worked together, and then all of the marketing teams worked together and things like that. So that's what they applied for. Okay, this is our Parks and Recreation Director up here presenting to the kids that this is in fact a real world problem. This is when they started to believe me that erosion was not just in a textbook. I promised them that it was a real thing. This is some examples of a project in Bartlett that she presented to the kids because, again, they didn't quite believe me that it was a big issue. But if you look, this is just in 2008 and 2018, one of our local ponds that had to be fixed because it was suffering with major erosion issues, and our city had to pay a lot of money to get it fixed. And then to give the kids a real-world connection, especially our engineers who were picking out all the materials that we were going to have to use for this project, like you tell a kid, okay, grass is an option, but they don't understand like a truckload of grass. So, and it doesn't take just one square of grass to fix erosion. It takes truckloads. So we arranged for the Parks and Rec guys, the guys that move all of our materials, rocks and grass and bushes and all that, plant all that stuff, to bring out a dump truck, which may have been their like second most favorite day because the dump truck moved and they thought that was amazing because, you know, they're 9 and 10. But they got a real world example of, hey, when we fix erosion, we're filling up 2 and 3 of these dump trucks worth of grass and rocks. So they were like, oh. So it helped them to understand, you have to buy a lot of stuff for this. Like, this is not a simple project. So that was a lot of fun for them. And that's what that picture is. Okay, and these are my arts babies, my ones that they loved this project, but this is them creating their logo. They're creating a physical representation that we took when we presented our project at our city hall. And then they all had their little badges that made them very official for every team that they were on. And then also our arts kids, we had photographers that took pictures throughout the project, and our high school photography teacher came over and taught the kids how to use cameras, and we borrowed the high school's cameras, so they felt very grown that they got to use stuff the high schoolers got to use. And our teachers loved working with us. And then this is the day that we presented. All 115 of them went to City Hall, and then we had 2 kids from each homeroom that presented because to let all 115 of them talk would have gotten us nowhere, even though they would have gladly done it. But this is them. This is all of our kids with some of the physical representations and the logos that they had created for the project. And this is my teammate that's actually talking before they presented. But the kids got to present at City Hall, and this is where they wanted to have smoke and music. We didn't quite work that out next year, but we got to put that in the budget, a fog machine for next year, so.
You take over. So we want to take a few minutes now that we've talked about the specifics of this project to zoom out a little bit and go through some general considerations for building these kinds of community-involved, transdisciplinary learning events. So we'd like just to take 3 minutes to talk with the people around you about maybe an experience you've had with a STEM or STEAM learning project. And if you would like to talk about STEAM, we're really interested in how the arts can amplify the great work that the students are doing. We will ask for maybe 1 or 2 to share. So if you have somebody you'd like to nominate or you have something to share at the end of these 3 minutes, we would love to hear from you. Okay, please turn and talk.
That was our first step, was planning one vertical PBLs.
Okay, I always hate to break up good conversation. Does anybody have something they would like to share? Somebody nominate someone? Anybody have something they'd like to share about your experience working with a transdisciplinary learning project across STEAM involving a community or the arts? Everyone's so shy. Okay, maybe at the end. Give you time to build your confidence. This is a friendly group, I can tell. So some of the approaches that we took to help build this project to make sure that in working across the 5 different teams and across bringing in so much content was to really think about the big picture and what was happening with the learning. So we developed a big idea or enduring understanding that would help connect all of these contents together for the students. And we also talked about some essential questions, and then really what we hoped the students would get from this project through the project objectives. Jessica had some great things to share about what happened and how these really became very real when working with the students. So I'm going to throw it back to you to talk about that.
Especially as we were doing the project and after, it was funny because we had so many kids that I would get emails from their parents. So-and-so saw this example of erosion and thought you had to see it. You know, I got lots of pictures of curbs over a month period. And I also found like my kids were connecting it in other classes. They're like, we read a story and it had erosion in it in reading. And so we told Miss Utter, and I'm like, oh, I'm sure Miss Utter loved that you interrupted the class to talk about erosion. And then we had our kids that I just saw them more willing to talk to people that weren't just Oak people. Like at City Hall, they were going up to council people and talking to them like they'd known them forever. And I'm not even comfortable doing that. I'm typically not the person that even wants to answer something in a session. So it was just really interesting to see how the kids took this and then they continued to apply it throughout the year. Like everything we learned about in science, they wanted to dig deeper. They wanted to have more experiences like the one that we had here, and how it kind of made it easier on me because they ended up planning their own projects like throughout the year. Like we did food chains and food webs after, and they wanted to map out an entire food chain of an ecosystem. And we did invasive species, and that was a hit. They loved that, and they took the same approach. So it really did this one project that I thought, well, they had fun, and they really liked it, and they knew what erosion was, but is it going to do anything in the future? And I really did see them kind of blossom as like science students, and how all of my kids really, they got so much better at working together, because 9 and 10-year-olds struggle to work on teams sometimes, especially if it's not the people that they want to work with. I know that's not shocking to any of y'all, but I saw them grow as a groups, like the classes as a community. Like they loved on each other a little bit more, and they were kinder to each other, and they wanted to work together. So that was a huge bonus for me behaviorally as a teacher.
Yeah, I love that they really went from like not noticing some things to being really attentive and seeing more deeply and seeing differently. And that's kind of what the arts are all about, so that's very cool. Yes, this does connect to the standards. So another approach we took was really thinking about what the standards are asking the students to do and how they can work together across content areas. We'll talk more about assessment later on, so stay tuned for that. So this looks like a giant mess. Sometimes planning these types of things can be a little messy. When Dr. Foust asked for me to help think about how to prepare the students for conducting their own research, I realized I needed to do a little bit of research on my own in order to kind of set things up to support the educators and the students to do their best research. So I just started with some inquiry, like some questions. Why does erosion happen? Where is it a problem in Bartlett? What are some things that can be done to address erosion? And some things that surprised me about this was just how much soil is lost, and that kind of inspired the dump truck as a way for the students to quantify what that actually looks like. That was very surprising. It was also really surprising to look at the comparison of ways to address erosion and how expensive they were, but how that was still a better option than actually losing all of that dirt because of the impact it can have, particularly in a water environment, on the aquatic environment, the plants and the fish. It can become a real problem for them. So these images connect with the previous slide. This is kind of the more formalized version of what that became. The top image is from the U.S. Department of Agricultural Web Soil Survey. This is available for anybody to use, and it just really talks about like what kind of soil is in your area and how to measure the wind and water erosion that impact it. The lower left is an example of a graphic organizer that was informed by the Web Soil Survey, but kind of translated to 4th grade language of like what makes this site special, what kind of soil is at this particular park or at this particular ball field or on their playground, and then how much wind is affecting it, how much water is affecting it, how is that actually measured. And I talk about the playground, like I thought that was just such a cool thing. So one other little component that really inspired this project for the students was some of the students noticed that one of their peers was having trouble accessing the school playground because the erosion had caused uneven ground in the sidewalk, and their peer couldn't access the playground with some of the other students. So the students had a very real-world connection to like how this not only impacts the community and the diversity among the fish, like we talked about, but also like their friends are having a direct impact. And I just thought that was really cool that they were like, we can do something about this, and they felt really empowered to learn about this and address it. The lower image talks about like what makes the site special and which of these erosion things might be the most appropriate for this site. Like, do we need grass? Do we need tubes and wattles? Like, how, does this site have water or not? What are the trees doing? So they could really think about how each site is unique and that not one solution is the best for all site. And then the last one is just showing how this knowledge didn't live on that page. They were able then to take this and share it with the community beyond just learning about it in the classroom. Okay, so we hope that seeing this planning process gives you an idea or inspires you to create a project that is based on something that's important for your community and your students while still addressing the standards and being able to take some grades, because that's very important. We all need those. So we want to give you a couple of minutes again to turn and talk with some people around you to think about how you might address assessment and grade collection within your unique context while still involving students in this more project-based approach. Okay, we'll take 2 minutes.
All right, let's come back together here for just a moment. We'd really love to hear some ideas from a couple of you to answer this question. So how might student learning be assessed in this type of project? What are some ideas that some of you have? So maybe non-traditional ways we could do that? Rubrics is one way, yes. Anything else? Yes. Yes. So when we did this project and we had the students go to City Hall, this was the first year we've done this project, and it will be repeated in the future. And we learned some things along the way that we'll talk about in just a moment. And one of those things was we need to take more advantage of those community partners at the end of this project, to give us feedback. It was good for those students to have that experience to go to City Hall and do a presentation. And I can't imagine doing that when I was that age, but they handled it very well. It's funny because I was standing in the back of the room watching the presentations, and a person was standing next to me. He introduced himself to me. He said, "Oh, I'm the city engineer." And he said, "If you ever do this project again, give me a call before you do this, because we'll take your students on a tour of facilities, and we'll do this and we'll do that." And I thought, oh, why didn't I think of that? But we're going to do that next year for sure. So we've learned some lessons to take advantage of those community partners all the way through the project to the very end. Yes.
I have something that, because you were talking about teamwork and people getting along, and this takes a little front loading on my part, but what I do, and it will last the whole year because I can draw it in a spreadsheet, but I go, we have Microsoft Office, so we have forms, and I set up forms with a little assessment that they would do on their partners. It's a drop down of all the kids in their class. So on this is who I worked with, and it has just 2 or 3 little rating categories. If it's a positive rating, like 3, 4, or 5, then they don't have to put a comment. But if you're going to negatively rate someone, you have to say why. Like, Jimmy didn't do well with communication because he went off on his own and did so-and-so. And so it kind of gives you, but it's also, as far as assessment goes, it gives me a quarter per year, things to work on when you do meet with those kids. So that's just kind of the way it ties in.
Yes, that's great information. Thank you.
I hadn't thought about having them rate their partners. That's a good idea.
Yes.
Putting that on the list. We
Yes.
got a list of things we're doing slightly different next year. So.
Right. So could you talk,
Lots.
Jessica, a little bit about the grading process? I know you mentioned it before. How
Sure.
that worked with all the different aspects.
In science, it was obviously easy to give a grade. We gave a project grade. We gave them a unit test about erosion before we did the project. They knew nothing. They didn't do very good. And then we gave them it after the project. And I think our pass rate, which at our school is like 75% or above, was like 98% of them. And that's saying something. But the other core subjects, we had to get them on board because we had to use them. We had 5 homerooms. We had 5 different teachers that are teaching 5 different things. And if science is not your thing, we all know we're focused on the thing that we're teaching. So for reading, I sat down with the reading teachers and I was like, look, this could be great because we have all these writing standards that they have to hit, and informational writing and informational text. So they would pull erosion texts for them to work on because our kids are terrible at informational text because they don't like to read for information. And so they also had them do a report at the end that they gave for a 9 weeks grade on informational writing, which was great. For our math team, at the time, we were doing multiplication and branching into division. It's more complicated than that. Math teachers, I'm fully aware. I don't teach math for a reason. But our math teacher, I worked with her to create word problems that they really needed that practiced those skills with math, not with math, obviously math, with multiplication and division that fit within the project that we had just done, that used those real world examples. We used the names of the places. So I helped her create some assessments that they could use. Our art teachers, we sat down with them and we said, hey, we want the kids to understand what a logo should look like. How do you design a logo? Because you can all think of some of the most recognizable logos in the world, Apple's logo, Mac's, everything. And they're simple, right? They're simple. Their colors work well together. Well, that's a standard in 4th grade in art, is understanding those color combinations and understanding which are complementary of each other. So what our art teachers did was we got them to go ahead of me, and they taught all about those complementary colors, and they looked at logos, and they talked about it with the whole group. So then everybody got the experience, but our kids that were on the art team were well-versed in how to make a good logo by the time that we did the project. And it took a lot of front loading, like you had said. It takes a lot of front loading, and it took a lot of smooth talking and promises of coffee for me to convince the rest of the team to get on board, but they have all agreed to do it again. So I think that that's a win. If all 5 content areas were agreed to do it again, I'll take that as a win in my book.
Thank you. Another part, and we're about to round out the presentation here, but very quickly I wanted to show you a couple more things. Another part of the project evaluation was student and teacher interviews. So I actually interviewed a group of students a couple of weeks after this project ended. And Dr. Galbraith helped out with doing some coding. I love qualitative research. I know the quantitative is very important, but I love to hear stories from people on their experiences and everything. So you can see some of the responses that we got here from students, and I was very impressed by the high level that the students engaged with me on how they liked working in sorts of projects like this. And one student said, we did a lot, in particular to math, and we did a lot more math in this project than we normally do, but they also commented that it was fun and they wanted to do more work like this in the future. And it's probably because they're working with other people and they have very clear targets in mind. And the way everything was structured, it was just really fun for them to see a project through from beginning to end instead of doing work maybe in isolation where they don't really get to see the impact of what they're doing or even know the reason why they're doing it. And then part of this too was teacher responses. So there are 5 teachers on 4th grade level, so I sent them all a quick survey through email, and you can see some of the survey items there, the questions that I asked them. And we learned some lessons like I mentioned before. One lesson that we learned is how we divide up the groups and where students go. And then Jessica and I were just talking before the session started about doing this project across all 6 of our elementary schools next year at the 4th grade level. And so one thing that we could do is kick this off at the beginning of the year when we do our district learning day and get those teachers involved. And then, you know, we've already started brainstorming about what that would look like if all 6 elementary schools did this with 4th grade. So you can see some of those responses there. Students that don't normally want to participate were really excited about doing this work. Up front, you can see project difference. Very up front, it was a lot of teacher planning, but then once all of those plans were put into place, the students took over. And that's something Jessica can talk about. This was really a student, after the initial plans were put in place, students were doing all the work. Talk about that a little bit.
Yes. So just like he said, it was a lot of planning on the front end. I get that it's a little overwhelming. But we created all of the handouts that we're going to give to the students, exactly how the teams were going to function, all of that. But then I was pleasantly surprised, again, because they're 9 and 10, that once we started the project and the day of the project came, we just really facilitated. Like, we just walked around, made sure we answered any questions that they had, made sure that everybody was working well together, that nobody was off doing something they weren't supposed to do, because, you know, kids never do that. But we really, the days of the projects, we got to be hands-off, and we were all, 5 of us were probably pleasantly surprised at how easy that day was for us, because we didn't anticipate that it would be that easy, but the kids' buy-in was so great that we just kind of got to watch the learning happen, which is always fun to get to do.
Great, thank you. All right, we have just a little bit of time. Does anyone have questions, comments, suggestions, because we're going to do this project again? All right, well, if you don't have any, oh, go ahead, sorry.
You said the grant was for $55,000 over 3 years.
Yes.
Where did you spend the majority of that grant money on this project?
Well, for this project, the majority of the money was spent in collaboration with Dr. Galbraith, because she really served to do some work on design and project evaluation for this project. So I would say the majority of the money that we spent on this project was with hiring her to do this work. Now, other than that, we did order some supplies, so we were able to use grant money for that. So all the supplies that the art students used, we weren't taking those from the art teacher. We ordered everything that person needed and those teams needed to do that work. And going forward into next year, and we may decide we want to add some things to that, maybe a smoke machine.
Fog machine.
I don't know if the Arts Commission will let me purchase a smoke machine.
We'd have to spend that just right. Also, the use of subs, because we had our art teachers available to us the day of, so our art teams were led by our art teachers that day. So having the ability to have them for an entire half of a day where they just got to sit with our art kids that did that, and getting to bring over the high school photography teacher, like all of that was, we used some funds to be able to have those people at our access that day.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. The fact that our high school photography teacher was able to come over and not just bring cameras, but actually show that team how to use those cameras. I was there taking pictures when she was working with them, and you know, they really did feel like they had a job to do, and it was a very important job to do because they had that training, they had that camera in their hand, and they were very serious about their work. Okay, well, I thought I was going to, oh, did I turn it off? There we go. Here's our contact information. If you have questions for us later, or if you have suggestions for us, and you would like to send those, we would be happy to receive those. Thank you again for being here. We hope you have a good rest of your afternoon.